Welcome to Redefining Your Programming Purpose. I am Tracy Holmes, and I'm a developer advocate passionate about all things community. You can find me at Tracy Holmes all over the place. So let's get started. The Journey, Part 1. Slowly is the fastest way to get to where you want to be. And I truly believe that. I saw this person on some random TikTok video saying that, and that quote stuck with me. Anyway, let me give you some background. We'll call them the Austin phases. So, I've been in some facet of tech since the early aughts, cursing my way through C++ or .NET, working at the Residence Hall help desk at my university. I was a word-of-mouth community computer fixer-upper as a side hustle, and that was during Mississippi and my first Austin phase, which started in 2006. Then I decided to teach high school for a short bit. Austin Phase 2, I ended up at a Microsoft call center as a tech support person in 2010, and that culminated in a seething hatred of phones and phone calls. All phones and phone calls. Then it was back to Mississippi at a Corps of Engineers data center tech desk. I became supervisor of that tech desk and its remote counterpart. Then in 2012, I became a Windows sysadmin at that same data center. And I did all that while secretly befriending the Unix team, which honestly helped me learn a lot about Linux. And I say secretly because there's definitely a separation of duties at that data center. And that's when things really started to get interesting. Austin Phase 3. 2014, I went back to Austin as an onboarding and deployment engineer with a sprinkle of project management. And then by 2015, I discovered Women Who Code. I went all in with Women Who Code for a while also learning to code. And I was learning to code again for the first time in a very long time. I started networking. I started attending meetups, became a member of the Women Who Code leadership team. It was pretty nice. By 2016, I learned the hard way to get things in writing, and I had no job and had gotten tired of having bad experiences or being unhappy. So by this point, the landscape had definitely changed since Austin Phase 2, and I had to learn how to navigate Tech Austin. I no longer had the network I'd previously had during that time, and when I left, everything was still sysadmin and Microsoft or Unix, and now everything was coding. And by coding, I pretty much mean Python. That's what the fuss was. The fuss was Python. On top of that, there was nothing out there that really worked with how my brain worked. So for all the teaching I did and learning about learning styles, I never actually applied learning styles to my own brain, and it was starting to show. So I had people around me that knew I didn't know enough to know what I didn't know. I'll try to explain that during this live. All right, so Women Who Code gave me Trish, Laura, Catherine, and Ashley. Black Sync Technology gave me an OSCON volunteer opportunity that ended up giving me Women in Linux and its founder, Tamika Reed. Now, all of these people have something in common because they realized something that I hadn't realized at that point. I didn't know how to ask for help because I didn't know exactly what I needed. I just knew I liked learning, and I definitely needed to level set. Now, Trish taught me a lot about not learning too much at once. I have a very, very vast thirst for knowledge, and I love tinkering and learning, and that was hurting me. Once we drilled down the things I liked, it was a bit easier. And at that point, I hated Python because I was learning it for the wrong reason, which was just to get a job. But while I was trying to just get a job, I still didn't have access to any of the resources that were good for me and how I learned. Catherine and Ashley knew I was learning Ruby, so they not only did code review for me, they would give me challenges and homework. Catherine invited me to help co-lead the Ruby Tuesday meetup, and that was amazing. And finally, Laura helped me understand networking while volunteering and how to make those opportunities work for me. And she was also responsible for helping me not hate Python as much. And Tamika? Well, she did a combo of all of the above, and she still does to this day. In fact, Tamika cursed me out not too long after meeting me, and it got me my first interview at HashiCorp. Now, I didn't get the position, but at least I spoke with someone. And that's the important part. Remember that, because that residual energy will pop up every now and again. And even if you don't get the position, there are those out there that will remember the impression you left. I stayed on that slide just in case she watches this so I can get a text message. Journey part 2. This is what I call the 6 weeks from hell. I have a t-shirt that says this, and it's pretty true. Bad experiences make for some good stories. So in December 2017, on the 1st, I lost my grandmother. On the 15th, my relationship ended. And by the 31st, I'd lost my job. Now, I know I said 6 weeks, and December only has 4. Well, the part I don't usually add to that is in those last 2.5 weeks of November, I also had to fully plan a funeral for my friend's husband from his fit to the obit. And my mom also ended up with a concussion from an accident that involved the church stairs. Now, I'm not allowed to say more than that because if she watches this, she's going to get me. But I wasn't feeling much of anything, to be completely honest. I was just tired. Really, really tired. So in February 2018, I permanently moved back to Mississippi. Well, permanently for me, as you see those phases kind of go in and out every 3 years. I eventually found a casino tech support role. I helped them make some necessary changes, gain an award, and they got some recognition. And it took me being the bad guy to get that done. And I say that with quotes because I was the first female that they had hired probably in about 12 years. And before the end of the year, I had an apprenticeship at HashiCorp. Now, remember how I told you all to remember the impression you leave and the fact that you spoke to them, that means something. Well, the person that had previously interviewed me, remembered me, reached out to me and told me about the apprenticeship. And it was their first time offering that apprenticeship. Now, if you want to know how that went, check out my DevOps Days Texas 2021 talk, Apprenticeship, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I was finally promoted to plain old engineer in 2019, and finally, this is where my adjacency starts to show itself. So the gist is this. I gave an internal talk in early 2019 at our all company meeting, and it was a diversity talk where I told people about some stuff that I had gone through because, like I was the only female that they had hired at a previous position, by the time I got to engineering, I think I was the only Black person in engineering. And probably the company, or one of 3 or 4. But that being said, it was a diversity talk and it was well received. I was scared to give that talk. I told anybody that if they had any issues to go talk to their manager, don't give me the feedback. But after I gave that internal talk, later in the year, I got accepted for 2 external talks, and that was late 2019. Now, I've always loved teaching because I'm a light bulb person. I love to see the light bulb come on for people. And I found that I really enjoyed giving those talks. So I talked with our developer relations manager and moved into developer advocacy in early 2020. And I found out that not only did I like it, I was actually pretty decent at it. Part of my job consisted of hosting a podcast. Well, remember I mentioned Laura from Women Who Code? I reached out to her mid to late 2020. And in doing so, not only did Laura and I get reacquainted, I found out that she had also moved over to DevRel also. And just like before, she made sure to welcome me to the fold, give me a resource care package of sorts to get me on my way, as well as a podcast episode that we had to split into 2 parts because it was full of laughter and fun. Now, that particular role was actually very technical, which is not the same across the board for all DevRel roles. Not only did we build demos, we contributed to our respective open source projects. I got to learn a lot about content and editing media, as we did all of our own editing for our videos and our podcast and anything in between. Now, I still felt like I'd not given engineering a real chance, so I jumped over to a different company as an open source engineer for a bit. And to be honest, I just wasn't happy with a few things. Now, there's much to be said for having a great team dynamic, but not much of a plan for someone that's still a coding preteen. But I still tried to push myself, and I only made myself miserable. The environment wasn't just right for me. So I came back to advocacy, and here we are. The Journey Part 3, aka Where Am I Now and Does It Even Matter? The thing you want may be sitting butt to boot with the very thing you need. That's my definition of adjacency. And so that's where I'm at. I'm in a position that utilizes my weird but tech and teaching related background. It's an amalgamation of positions that works well for what I do. I've done project management, deployment, tech support, sysadmin work, rack and stat, was a math teacher for high school, restaurant and food related work, and a ton of customer service and client facing stuff. And where I am makes use of all of that. That last time I was really looking for work, like really, really looking for work, I sent someone my LinkedIn profile along with my resume at their request and told them, hey, I know it looks rough. And during our conversation, they responded with, what do you mean? What I see in this work history is a thread of someone that used everything they had to get to where they are. Now, it may not look like it to you, but your experience definitely has a thread, and it's not a bad thread. And that's not to say I'll never go back to engineering, because honestly, I really am a tinkerer, and I just have to see how things work. I need to go work on some projects now that I think about it, but my home lab is sitting right there waiting on me. But I stopped fighting myself to make myself go back to engineering, because like someone else told me, you're an engineer, you don't have to prove it. You definitely don't need to prove it to yourself. So things aren't, and I've realized things just aren't always dandelions and sunshine, but what is? Heck, even roses and marigolds stink. So I'm absolutely still learning things about developer relations and developer advocacy and all the things in between the longer I'm in the space and the deeper I try to dig to find new ways of approaching things. So whatever that thing is for you, don't push it away. Embrace it. See where it takes you. I mean it. Stop. Take a look. Especially if you're feeling down about your work. You don't feel like you fit. Things don't look like they'll work out. Make a list of the things you like and don't like about your career. And if you're like me and you tinker with coding projects or home labs outside of work, write that down also. Then take a look at the positions or departments you work with a lot and talk to the people in these positions. And for those of you currently looking for a job, start looking at those job descriptions. Openly ask questions on Twitter about positions that you think you might like, or how to do this or that and the other. Twitter can be harsh, I will admit that. Or Mastodon if you're jumping over. But there really are some good people on Twitter. That's how I got that first job at HashiCorp. Quick thing before I sign off, and it's slightly related. I've always been told I have a way with people, that I'm social. People think I'm bubbly. I was raised in the South. You're raised on passive aggressiveness. That socialite is a way to survive. But I'm actually a horrible introvert, and I wear a very convincing mask at times, especially at conferences. My issue when I first got into this role was thinking there was a perfect way to do it, or everything I did had to be perfect. Every mistake needed to be edited out. And I hated it. I didn't like being on a team where people thought that way either. I'm a write the outline after the paper type of person. And I just am what I am. So one day after I got into the role on my very first live stream, I decided to be myself, and people responded to it. And the more I did it, I realized I had my own style, my own thing. And I'm pretty candid. I'm very open about what I do or I don't know. I don't learn the same way a lot of people do, but I found that there are those out there like me. I like GIFs, yes, GIFs, not GIFs, in my presentations because they accurately convey those things that I can't always say or verbalize. And I try to take people on the journey with me, kind of like now. And one more thing before we get through, because I just thought about this and it's not in my speaker notes, but honestly, if what you want doesn't exist, create it. And that may be the most rewarding experience that you've ever had in your life. Sometimes people don't know what they need. And if you don't believe me, go back a few slides to read about that all over again. So all that's to say, you may find your purpose has been staring you in the face the entire time. Thanks.